So do you feel like you're struggling to stay connected either in the relationship that you're in or the relationships that you're trying to build? Like maybe you can't even be yourself in these relationships. And the thing is, the biggest issue that people maybe have some awareness about, but maybe don't really know what it means to cultivate, is that people are not cultivating real emotional intimacy in their relationships. And it's causing them to have a real deep, like a lack of a deep level of satisfaction in their lives and in their relationships. And understanding what emotional intimacy is and what's blocking you from being able to cultivate it is really, really big. So I'm going to unpack that today, and I'm going to really give you extremely clear information about what is probably blocking you from it and strategic steps that you can take so that you can cultivate this in yourself personally and in your relationships in your life. So if you're new here, I'm Ketra Thompson, and I'm a certified master hypnotist and a relational recovery coach that focuses on attachment style and really reframing the subconscious beliefs that are driving our unwanted behaviors. So with my clients, we go back on a subconscious level and we reframe those things subconsciously that are keeping you from creating the life and the love that you want. So if you'd like to learn more, there is always a link in the description below where you can check out my website and all of that information. You can set up a completely complimentary consultation call so that you and I can chat. Because the reality is that no one wants to jump into something that they don't fully understand, and they want to have their questions answered. And in order for me to give you my best recommendation, I want to know what you're dealing with, and I want to be able to help you get some clarity and some insights. So if you'd like to check that out, you can set that completely complimentary phone call up with the link in the description. So first, I want to give you my definition of what emotional intimacy is. It's being open with each other in a non-defensive state of mind, where you are open and curious, where you're not judgmental, where you're just open to letting the reality of what that person is thinking, feeling, or who they are be there, and vice versa. So it's open curiosity that has a level of vulnerability and depth to it. So that non-judgmental or non-defensive state of mind is really key when you're creating this level of emotional intimacy and connection. So here's a really clear way to understand this and process what this looks like. There's really 3 layers to building emotional intimacy. And the first layer is information. So this is a basic information exchange between 2 people. So it is, I went to work, I had lunch at this place, now I'm home. It's very basic and informational. Now, the second layer of that takes things a little bit deeper. So the next layer of communication would be more of an explanation. It would be an in-depth perspective on your workday, something like work kind of sucked, and I did feel really excited about that restaurant that I went to because I heard it had really good reviews, so I was super excited to go there. It's a little bit more personal. It's not really feeling based, but it's giving a more insight or depth into your experiences about that information. Now, the third level is actually where you are creating true emotional intimacy. So the third level is relational. So when you're being relational, you're sharing in real time about what's going on, either in that day or what's happening in the moment, in a way that's like, I felt really embarrassed at work today, and I'm even feeling right now that while I am telling you about this situation at work, that I'm a little bit afraid or nervous that you might judge me for it. And so you're being not only, hey, I was at work, hey, I was embarrassed about this thing at work, explaining a little more of the explanation. The information is that you're at work, the explanation, what happened. Now the relational part is and here's what I'm feeling about it in this moment. I'm feeling like a little nervous. My heart's racing a little bit because I'm afraid you might judge me about the way I handled that. You're being actually authentic. You are really laying it all out there. And this level of emotional intimacy is not something that a lot of people will embrace. This isn't something that they will oftentimes open up to with anyone, because it creates a level of vulnerability, but we really need the first two steps to get there. But in reality, even married people most of the time aren't in that third level where we're actually making it relational. And so we're missing out on a lot of deep connection, and we're missing out on something that actually creates a homeostasis in our body and our mind. So I want to expand on that a little bit. So all of that probably sounds a little bit daunting, maybe a little bit intimidating. And I want to explain why this is important. It's incredibly important for your happiness, your well-being. So let's talk about why you should even attempt to do this. Why should you be vulnerable? Why should you be authentic? Why should you have this deep emotional authenticity and connection to the people in your life? Well, first of all, let's talk about the chemical needs of our body. We chemically need certain hormones to be in balance so that we can be in homeostasis. And because of the way that we're wired as human beings, we do not get those chemical releases on our own. We can manage our stress, which produces a lot of cortisol, with things like dopamine. We can get this dopamine rush where we are trying to exercise a lot or, go get a thrill or whatever. But it's not actually creating a level of homeostasis that I'll go into a little bit more in depth in another video, but we need some other stuff. We need vasopressin and oxytocin and GABA and serotonin. And so because we need all of this balance, we literally cannot get it on our own. We are not built to create this level of happiness in our life by ourselves. We're very tribal. We were made to be tribal, and we're very connected. Matter of fact, human infants are the most dependent creatures on the planet. We absolutely need 100% of our caregivers' care and time and attention right away and for an extensive period of time. And so we are built and hardwired for connection and tribal kind of community, but deep, authentic connection. And so in order for us to have the chemicals that calm our nervous system, that help us feel secure and safe in this world, we need deep connection with other people. And what gets in the way of that is a lot of the fear-based programming that goes into the subconscious mind when we're young, and is actually very much controlled by our attachment style, which is, by the way, something we learned. We weren't born with this attachment style that we have. So I'm going to get into that in a minute. But we need these chemicals so that we can actually feel confident and thrive in our life. And when we have that in our personal life, we actually create a lot more success in our work life as well, because our nervous system calms down, and now we have the freedom to be creative and open and expressive, and we know we're not alone in this world. And so it's really, really important to get to that state. And I want to also touch on something else that's really big. We talk about the difference between sex drive between men and women, and I could do a whole video on a lot of aspects of that. But one thing you want to keep in mind is that for women, their sex drive is primarily driven by the depth of emotional connection in their relationships. So if they have good emotional intimacy and they feel really safe in that, and there's a lot of that open, clear connection and sharing, their sex drive is going to stay pretty high. It'll wear off about 1 year in if there is not that level of emotional connection. So we want to have a healthy sex drive as part of our life too, and this is a big part of it. Keeping that in mind can help you understand some of the important reasons why. And to keep in mind that at the end of the day, having real emotional intimacy means you are at home with that other person. You're able to be seen and known and fully accepted, step into home. You know that feeling you get home and you just go, oh, I'm home. I can be myself. I can change my clothes and take off my shoes and put my feet up and whatever. It's that on an emotional level. It goes, I'm home. I'm safe. I know I don't have to be perfect with this person because they are going to hold that space for me to be my authentic self, and I'm going to do that for them as well. So these are incredibly important reasons why we need this to feel that level of safety in our life. So let me just touch for a minute on how our attachment styles actually affect this. So there is secure attachment and there is insecure attachment. Now, part of insecure attachment is avoidant and part is anxious, but really there's anxiety kind of driving both of those. And those attachment styles are formed during our childhood, during our bonding experience with our primary caregivers, not only when we're first born, but throughout the years of our childhood. Our subconscious mind is being programmed for the first 7 years primarily where we are in a hypnotic state. We are in the theta brainwave state. And so we're assigning meaning to all these experiences, and then we're using that meaning to create a blueprint, a belief system in our subconscious mind. And part of that belief system is what's driving our attachment style. And our attachment style either says, I need to cling on to this person, I'm too afraid to be alone, or I need to push them away, I don't want them to see the real me, I can't trust other people, they aren't reliable. Or we can have this secure attachment that allows us to accept ourselves, live in our authenticity, hold boundaries when needed, communicate our needs, and feel safe and secure in this world. And so when we're struggling to have those connections, it probably means we have a type of insecure attachment, or we have something in our life that's triggering that insecure attachment. You can have a fairly secure attachment style and then still be in a relationship with someone who really doesn't have secure attachment, and that can trigger you to feel a little more insecure and bring up some things that maybe were part of that programming that were maybe not as big, but are still in there. So because this is something that we learned, it can certainly be something that we unlearn, and that we learn new skills to enhance and cultivate a new way of being. This isn't how you were born. This isn't your authentic self. This is something that got programmed into you. And so the ways that we can cultivate this growth process of really creating this emotional connection and emotional intimacy is that we can have shared experiences. We need to do things with other people. Like, let's go do this thing. Let's figure this thing out. Having the shared experience is really, really important because you're both experiencing this thing from your own perspective and a together perspective, and it gives you a lot to communicate and bond over. So shared experiences are important. Do not discount them. I know how crazy life can be. I know how it was when I had little kids at home. It is incredibly important that you are not just sharing the duties of life, but you are sharing other experiences together. So that's one thing you can do right away to step toward this process. Now, the second thing is basic communication. Communication is small daily communication. It's sharing about your day. It's the information part of that process. And then, of course, the next step is really the deeper, more explanation part of that process where you're explaining a little more about what that meant to you during the day. And then, of course, that third part is the relational part of that communication. And so the vulnerable relational part is how it impacted you, how it's impacting you in real time right now, and even your insecurities about it. So when you have that kind of person in your life, you can really, really open up and share and feel safe doing it. But you have to remember that you're not going to know if you can go there with that person until you step into the vulnerability of doing it. You have to do it, and someone has to lead the way. Someone has to set the example of, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be vulnerable even if you won't be with me. And it can feel scary and it can feel risky, but it's absolutely worth it because that's how we get to the next level. So one thing to keep in mind is that when you won't share your fears or your vulnerabilities with your partner, you're losing a piece of the honesty in that relationship. You are no longer being honest with the person in your life. And when you hold back on honesty, you're breaking the team mentality, the team bond, and you are betraying yourself. And it creates a lot of loneliness and emotional isolation. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to stop that honest process. So let me share with you a real example that I actually kind of experienced yesterday of being open and vulnerable and sharing. So I went to a store I haven't been to really for years in a different part, kind of a different town across the river where I used to live years ago when my kids were young. And I was telling my mom about this last night. So I was giving her the information. Here's where I was. Here's where I went. I was over there for a dentist appointment. I went in to the store to grab some things, and I immediately was, explaining my experience. I said, I felt like I stepped back in time. I felt like I stepped back into another life when I used to go to this store all the time when my kids were little. Like a version of me that I've outgrown, that I no longer am in, and it was unexpectedly emotional. And then I went on to tell her more about that. I was emotional because I had forgotten about these feelings or this old part of the pain within me that has had to let go of that life and what I thought that life would be and what that brought up in me. And I went on to really be vulnerable with her. So in that conversation, I could have just said, I went to that store. I could have said, oh, it was weird being back in that store. But I really took it to that next level of vulnerability, being honest that brought up some feelings and emotions for me that reminded me there is a loss there, and explained to her how I was feeling. And so it was a good reminder to me about the way that we choose to be open and vulnerable with the people in our life, letting them see we're real. We're human. We have days that are not 100% perfect sometimes, but that's the human experience. And so letting someone in on that is just so incredibly important, not only for the chemical balance in our own bodies, but our own personal feelings of safety in this world. And so sometimes I think there's groups of people, especially for men, they can really keep men from embracing this part of themselves. A lot of Christian groups do this, where they kind of paint a picture of how a man is supposed to be or a woman is supposed to be, and they kind of put labels around that. And so because the people feel like they can never be honest with their partner or their spouse about their fears or feelings or needs or desires, they end up having a lot of shame and guilt for even having those feelings and desires. It keeps them distant from each other and no longer in that team building mentality where they really have each other's back. And when you hold back your authenticity, that's oftentimes where depression comes from. You aren't being your authentic self. You aren't being seen, heard, or supported by others. And it's also because you're holding back. And so there's this difference between trying to wear that mask and be someone else and actually being authentic. So it makes you feel like there's extra weight on you when you can't be authentic. And it can make you nervous to share who you are with the people around you. And this is like trying to just be what someone else wants you to be. And it really can even play out like this. So let's say you're talking to your partner and you're feeling hurt or upset, and you can say something like something accusatory, okay? You never do this, or you always do that, or I can't believe you don't want to, I can't even think of a good example. Something that is accusatory, okay? If you really think about that, you're breaking the connection of communication. But in reality, what you're trying to do is you're trying to take the relational part of connection, the feelings you're having, and you're trying to make them informational. You're going back into the steps, into the first step where you go, let me give you this information and I want you to fix it on that level, when that's not how we fix it. We fix it the other way around by really sharing how we are feeling in the moment and how those things are affecting the way that we feel, not in that accusatory way of this is all your fault and you always do this or you never do that. We're sharing it in the way that when this happened, I felt really rejected. And maybe the first time I felt rejected was when I was a kid, and maybe you expand more and get more vulnerable, and then you can expand more into what I would need, right? What I need moving forward would be for you to hear me out and be curious. Like, we can express that. But to get to that point of expressing those kinds of things, we have to practice these 3 layers and stepping into it regularly so we can even make clear requests. So let me take a step back for just a moment and explain that part of this comes from self-intimacy first. We have to know what we need if we're going to express that need. We have to know what we feel if we're going to express that to our partner. And we have to feel confident and safe enough in who we are to be able to step into this vulnerability. And so securely attached people really have a lot of those things lined up for themselves already. That self-acceptance that leads to authenticity. It really is kind of like, I don't care what other people think of me, but not in an arrogant way, but in a way that's like, I know who I am. I'm okay with expressing it. This is good. Like people don't have to agree with me. I don't have to convince them of my point of view. I can be authentic. And so when we're doing the hypnotherapy process, we're able to go back on that subconscious level and reframe those belief systems where they were formed. And that is a game changer, okay? A game changer. When we reframe them subconsciously, now we have a new operating system because the subconscious mind is driving over 95% of everything we think, feel, and do. But we don't have access to it really unless we're in the hypnotic state. So what happens is we try to communicate and one or both parties gets triggered, gets emotionally dysregulated, gets defensive, or starts projecting. And that's where all of this emotional intimacy stops. So if you can deal with the trigger, the unconscious, subconscious programming, now you don't have all these breakup things that are stopping you from connection. Now you can communicate, you can flow, you can ask for what you need. You can even ask for the break when you need the break from the conversation. And so addressing this on the subconscious level is profound. And it's what I help my clients do every single day. So not only do I address things on the subconscious level through the hypnotherapy process, but I have all these coaching certifications, so I make sure my clients have all the tools and all of these practical things that they can now implement into their life in a new way, creating a dynamic that is so much more fulfilling. And the process is unique because it's a pairing of both of these going back, reframing process and the future-focused, forward movement, practical things that give people so much success. So let me give you some practical steps that you can take today. This has been kind of a longer video and I could probably go on and on about this, but I want to give you some practical things. So first of all, you can start with some self-reflection. Ask yourself, where am I pretending or where am I hiding parts of me from the important people in my life? If you get real with yourself, you're probably going to see a lot of stuff that you aren't sharing, that you're holding back. So it can be helpful to write that out. Ask yourself, what do I fear about this part of me being rejected? What will happen? What's the worst thing that could happen if this part of me gets rejected? And get honest with yourself about that. You might feel like you just don't know how to deal with those feelings. And that is part of the problem. If we reveal ourselves, we might not hear something back that we want to hear. We might feel rejected. We might feel judged. And now, what do? Because we don't know how to process those feelings and we're going to be overwhelmed or we're going to be flooded and we feel scared and we don't have any tools or processes to actually handle that kind of rejection. And so out of fear, we will avoid it. So the third thing you want to ask yourself is, am I willing to try something new? Am I willing to do it messily? Am I willing to do it badly and to learn from that and to keep going? Because you cannot grow unless you're willing to do something not perfect. You don't master something at the level of perfection. You master it messily. You master it by keep trying and refining and really being self-reflective in the process. So if you are terrified about being real because you don't know what to do with the emotions that are going to come up and they might flood you and overwhelm you and drown you in shame and guilt and keep you up at night and create more chaos, then you really do need to get some help because you don't want to live your life like that. Nobody wants to live their life like that. And that avoidance will keep you from the deep connection that you want and the success that you want. So here's a couple of action steps. Identify and reframe that subconscious programming. Obviously, that's what I help my clients do through the custom hypnotherapy process every single day. Identifying those and reframing them subconsciously, not just consciously, is huge. You can know the difference. You can know consciously, oh, I shouldn't think that way, or that isn't true. But you don't have access to your subconscious mind when you're not in the hypnotic state. And so you aren't able to integrate that information on that deep level of what's really driving your behavior. Now, the second thing you can do is you can start cultivating communication with a safe person. Start practicing this, going through those other levels of the information, the explanation, and the relationship part of this. Do it with a friend, do it with a relative, do it with someone that you can build trust with. I do this with my clients weekly as we're getting together for the hypnotherapy process. We go over and talk about things so that there is rapport and trust, but you can do this with someone in your life. You just have to be willing to maybe preface that with them. Hey, I'm practicing this. Would you mind practicing this with me? It's an important step to take if you aren't ready to do it in your intimate relationship. So again, I want to mention that the programs that I have for my clients are customized and they are specific so that you can reframe those things subconsciously and have all the tools that you need to move forward into functioning in a new way. Because let's face it, who wants to live their life constantly feeling like they aren't accepted, they aren't connected, they aren't supported, they're dysregulated emotionally, and then their triggers have them all over the place? And I just don't think anyone wants to live that way. So again, if you'd like to learn more, check out that link in the description. I'd love to chat with you. And I hope you're putting yourself as your top priority, because the investment you make in yourself is something that no one else can take away. So until next time, I hope you curate a life by your own design.